You're now listening to Oxycontin. Woo! Peace, family. Welcome back to another episode. Well, let me make this known now. This is going to be the new brand of 101 with Oxycontin. It's no longer going to be called the Lion's Den. I'm going to go ahead and switch up, the intro when I get some time sooner or later. But here on out, we're calling it the 101 with Oxycontin. The reason why I did that, there's a few reasons. One, when it comes to the Lion's Den, it's very saturated when it comes to that name, as well as diluted with that name. So in order for me to stand out, I have to make my own brand. So I figured, 101 with Oxycontin. That to me sounds a lot more presentable. And I know for the most part, it's not used, or should I say copywritten. So welcome to 101 with Oxycontin. Anyways, with that being said, today's episode is The Whimsical Nature of a Woman, Part 2. I'll say this is 2 underneath this podcast. We're bringing another installment back in. So with that being said, let's get into it. I'm going to be doing a backdrop of Mr. Ballin. You guys don't know who Mr. Ballin is. He's a YouTuber off YouTube. You go to Mr. Ballin on YouTube, type it in. A great storyteller. He takes real life stories and, he retell them on YouTube. And I've been following Mr. Ballin since 2019. Big fan of him. He's wonderful at what he does. And I caught up on all his stories. When I mean all, I mean everything in the playlist. So, I enjoy his shit. And, the segment we're doing today is his segment on police prank criminal on camera. Now, when I first seen this, I figured as soon as I saw it, I already automatically knew this is something I want to use for my segment. I really like where he's going with this. I'm going to use this as a backdrop. So, without further ado, let's get into it, baby. Yes, let's go.
In 2009, the popular true crime TV show Cops just happened to be in South Florida filming when a truly diabolical crime was committed there. And so cops captured this crime on camera. But someone in their footage was hiding something. And when you know what that something was, it becomes very obvious when you watch. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once or twice every week. So if that's of interest to you, please ask the like button if you can borrow their car for the week, and then when they say yes, spend that week driving around picking up as much roadkill as possible and packing it into their trunk. Picking up as much roadkill as you possibly can and pack it into their back seat in their trunk, and then return the car. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. Michael DiPolito grew up in a very rough neighborhood in South Philadelphia where violence, drugs, and prostitution were just normal parts of everyday life. At a young age, like his parents, Michael became an alcoholic. He also developed a very serious drug addiction that he paid for by selling drugs. Michael would eventually drop out of high school, and not long after that, he became homeless and was living out on the streets, sleeping in abandoned buildings at night to stay warm. In 1993, when Michael was still in South...
Right off the bat, let me punch in here, man. I always say, fellas, when it comes to your upbringing, me being from my upbringings, I understand what Michael somewhat was going through. Being exposed to that kind of environment, it does take a toll on your mental health, your mental mind. So, pay attention to that. That's key. Understand where you're coming from and where you're going at in life, because you had a rough upbringing doesn't necessarily means your life had to be that either. I just wanted to point that out. So, let's continue here.
Out on the streets, sleeping in abandoned buildings at night to stay warm. In 1993, when Michael was still in South Philadelphia, he was arrested for the first time. He was charged with possession of an unknown drug as well as intent to distribute this unknown drug. Court records don't specify what drug this was. However, Michael just did not show up for court, and so a warrant was put out for his arrest. Michael would somehow manage to evade police capture, and by 1997, he had fled South Philly altogether and landed in South Florida in a town called Boca Raton. Shortly after arriving there, Michael was arrested for a second time, this time for offering an undercover police officer $15 in exchange for sex. Michael would plead guilty to soliciting prostitution. However, he would just get released. A year after the prostitution arrest.
My fault. I want to punch in real quick. My mom's, Mama Dukes used to always tell me, it don't matter where you move at in life, wherever you go and you taking you with you. So with that being said, I want to speak on Michael a little bit. I don't know Michael, but I once too was a dude who figured by moving, you have a fresh start in life. But at the same time, you got to realize with this fresh start, you have to have a fresh mindset. You cannot take your bad habits with you into a new location and expect the best to work out for you. It will not. You have to have you have to let your mind be retaught. Let all them bad habits die from wherever you move from. That's for one. I'm not criticizing Michael. I don't know Michael, but I'm just doing, my little, pretty much my assessment on what I'm hearing. You gotta let the old shit die in the past, whatever you're going at in life. You gotta start fresh. If you're going somewhere to start fresh, you gotta have a fresh mindset. You cannot carry bad habits. So, that being said, let's get back in.
Michael was sued by a former girlfriend named Karen Tan, who claimed he was the father of her son, and so he owed her child support. And Karen had a DNA test that backed up this claim. However, Michael, again, would just not show up for court, and before long, Karen just gave up and dropped the lawsuit. Michael was likely very relieved when this happened because at the time, he was making almost no money through a temp agency. And so after this lawsuit gets dropped, Michael decides, I need to go out and make some real money. And somehow, on his quest to find a more lucrative opportunity, Michael was introduced to associates of the Bonanno family. And the Bonanno family is one of the infamous 5 families that dominates organized crime across the United States. They are literally the Italian mafia. And after the mafia met Michael, they took a liking to him, and they did offer him a more lucrative, albeit illegal, opportunity. They gave him a role inside one of their so-called boiler rooms. A boiler room is not literally a boiler room. Instead, it's a group of fraudsters that use high-pressure sales tactics to steal money from unsuspecting victims. Typically, the way it works is the fraudster will cold call someone, and they will tell them that they have this great get-rich-quick scheme, but you got to give me your money right now if you want to be a part of it. And so when the victim says, okay, that sounds great, and they wire the money along, the fraudster just steals their money. Michael, who was very charismatic and a natural salesman, got really good at tricking people into giving him their money. And so eventually, Michael realized he could make a lot more money if he started his own boiler room where his commission could be much higher on the money he stole. And so fairly abruptly, he left the mafia's boiler room. We don't really know how they reacted to this. And Michael would set up not one, but 2 boiler room scams of his own in South Florida. And by 2002, he had pocketed $155,000 of stolen money.
All right, let me punch right back in. I want to say this. Tricking people out their money, trying to take shortcuts and getting rich, all you do is prolonging your karma, which in other words, karma to me means judgment in the Bible. Prejudgment. Prejudgment come by doing wrong. You know how people say, do unto others as you want done to you? That's very true. You know, when you're trying to take shortcuts and scam people on money, or so-called take revenge in your hand when somebody, quote unquote, done you wrong, you're prolonging that person's judgment. And if you're doing wrong, all you're doing is making your judgment even worse. Sooner or later, you will fall. The Most High, if you let the Most High and you believe in the so-called Most High, he will go ahead and handle people who done wrong onto his people who is righteous. Believe that. So, you know, I was once one of them people who thought scheming people or, you know, trying to sell drugs and quote unquote poisoning my people to get some couple of dollars in my pocket was doing right and making quick money. Well, all I was doing is chasing my tail in a circle. In other words, no matter which way I try to do it, how I try to do it, shit just ended up wrong. It really did. So, you know, I just want you guys to take mindful of that and keep that in your perspective and your mindset when you quote unquote scamming people out of money. Nothing good from taking shortcuts. All you do is prolonging yourself. There's no time to waste because we all don't know when our expiration date might pop up on us. So that being said, it never beats to scheme people, rob people, or, you know, just straight up take revenge in your hands. If somebody did wrong to you, let the Most High work on his time and he'll handle them. In order for that to happen, you have to let it go. So with that being said, let's get back in. That just caught my attention. I want to punch in on that. So let's dive back in.
However, he had spent virtually all of it on fancy hotels and cars and phone sex. But the good times would not last for Michael because in 2002, the police caught on to Michael's boiler room scams and they raided them, and Michael was arrested for a third time, except this time he would go to court, he would stand trial, and he would be sentenced to 2 years in prison, 28 years of probation, and he would be ordered to pay back the $155,000 that he stole. Michael would only serve 7.
You see what I mean? Sooner or later, karma, or just quote unquote, aka judgment, will catch up with you. Who the hell in their right mind want to do 28 years? Even though you did 2 years of prison time, who in their right mind want to do 28 years of fucking probation? I know I don't. Shit. You see what I mean? So let's continue. I just want to point that out to you.
Months of his 2-year jail sentence, but that was more than enough to leave a huge impact on him. Michael hated prison. He hated every second of it. And so during those long sleepless nights that he was laying awake in his cell, he made a promise to himself that when he got out, when he was released, he would never, ever come back. And so in 2003, when he was released, he immediately entered a sobriety program. He also started going to the gym every morning, and he began studying for his GED, which is a high school equivalency test because he didn't get his high school diploma. After he successfully earned his GED a couple of months later, he would also start a legal business. It was a digital marketing firm that was called Mad Money Inc. Over the next several years, Michael would do his very best to stay on the straight and narrow and not get in trouble. And for the most part, he did that. By 2008, Michael was still sober despite a few setbacks, and he was still very focused on his physical fitness and his health, and his business, Mad Money, was doing quite well, earning him nearly $100,000 a year. But his love life had become a bit messy. Michael had gotten married back in 2007 to his longtime girlfriend named Maria Luongo, who had stood by him when he went to jail. But that year, in 2008, when Michael was 38 years old, he cheated on Maria with a 26-year-old real estate agent named Dalia Mohammed, who he met at a Starbucks. And instead of their affair being a quick fling, as they likely both intended it to be, Michael and Dalia quickly fell in love. And when that happened, Michael went to his wife Maria and he told her, and then he divorced her. Just 3 days after the divorce finalized, Michael and Dalia went to the courthouse and they got married.
Okay, let me punch in because Mr. Ballin said a mouthful here. Okay, now, before I even get into the love life of Michael, let's understand this. Michael had a revelation at one point in his life, rather it was when in prison or whatever, he had it. But he came out of prison and he started something lucrative, something real, something with substance. Pretty much, he started his own business. No shortcuts, no scamming, no scheming, no robbing. Something real. That right there speaks volumes to me. Michael hated prison from what Mr. Ballin is saying. So that tells me a lot. That tells me that Michael, in other words, understand that he learned his lesson. Rather if he believed in the Most High or not, he understood doing wrong on the others doesn't pay, but to do right is something more substantial. Now, on to Michael's love life. And it's falling on to most of you guys. Michael, once again, he fell in love way too quickly. You know, you marry one woman, okay, cool. And then you turn around, you had a divorce. And now, because you had an affair, which was the right thing, you ended it with the so-called first woman. Well, within 3 days after you finalize your divorce, you're automatically running to get remarried? Hell to the no. I don't agree with that. Take your time, man. Get to know these women. You already know what I'm going to say. There's no reason why Michael should have been rushing. You know, it seemed like he rushed into his first marriage, and look at how that turned out. So take your time, you know. Don't rush nothing. Take your time. If a woman can't wait on you, then the hell with her. What the hell you rushing for? Look at Michael, man. So, you know, all I'm going to say is this. He didn't take his time to get to know this woman, and that could come back and bite him in his ass. So let's continue on.
Newlyweds would move into a brand new condo that Michael had purchased for them in Boynton Beach, which is a beautiful town in South Florida. And for a time, their life was perfect. They knew it was a little outrageous the way they had met each other and how quickly they had fallen for each other, but they didn't care. They got along great and they were excited about the future. But their perfect life would not last long. On the evening of March 12th, 2009, so only about a month after they had gotten married, Michael and Dahlia were at home in their condo when they heard a knock on the front door. And so Michael went to the door, he opened it up, and much to his surprise, standing on the other side was his probation officer, and behind him was a whole bunch of police officers. And before Michael could even ask what was going on, the probation officer told Michael that they had received an anonymous call tipping them off that Michael was selling steroids and ecstasy pills and other drugs out of his condo. Michael would tell the probation officer that there was no way that was true. He is not selling any drugs. He's sober. He's not doing that. And so eventually Michael just stepped aside and said, please come in, search my condo. I have nothing to hide. And so sure enough, the police, they would go into his condo, they would search it, but they wouldn't find anything and they would leave. And so after the police had gone, Michael and Dahlia found themselves just standing in their condo, completely dumbfounded. But instead of trying to get to the bottom of it right then and there about who had called and why, they just decided it was best for them to just leave their condo for the night and go stay at a nice hotel. And so they packed up some bags, they left their condo, which was a total mess from the police search, and they went to the hotel and they had a nice night together. The next morning, when they got up and headed down to the parking lot, they saw up ahead, standing around Michael's car, was Michael's probation officer as well as several other police officers. And so Michael and Dahlia are looking at each other like, what is this again? And so they hustle on over to Michael's car, and before they can even plead their innocence to Michael's probation officer, he stops Michael and just says, look, we got another anonymous call, this time telling us that you are selling drugs out of your vehicle, and so we need to search it. And so Michael is just totally beside himself, but he says, look, go ahead, search it. There's nothing in the car. And so sure enough, the police would open up his car, they'd rip it apart, but again, they wouldn't find anything. Over the next couple of weeks, the only thing Michael and Dahlia ever wanted to talk about was what the heck was going on. Who is placing these anonymous calls claiming that Michael was selling drugs out of the condo and out of the car? car, it just didn't add up. They wanted to believe that this was all just one big mistake, but in the back of both of their minds, they were thinking about Michael's very checkered past and his previous dealings with the mafia and with people he had clearly ripped off. And so maybe there was someone in his past that was looking to get back at Michael and maybe get him arrested and sent back to jail.
Okay, let me punch in here. Now, if I was in Michael's shoes, I would do a good assessment on the people around me. The reason why I say this, for one, Michael did enough time and it took him 7 years to progress with his so-called business. You know what I mean? So for somebody who really want him to get locked up, it seems personal. Now, he already been ordered. Now, remind you, listen, if you go back, rewind to Mr. Ballin, he said that he was pretty much ordered by the judge to pay back the money that he ripped off. So that writes off any hard feelings with people. Not going to say it's going to clear up everything, but he got to pay back the money that he stole. Okay, cool. All right. So that might take care of half of the people he ripped off. The mafia, that might be something else. You know, you see, men, this is why I'm using this as a backdrop. You have to use your three-dimensional mind before you get yourself caught up in some bullshit. You know, but even then, if the mafia wanted to touch him, he would have been touched already. If they really wanted to, I'm going to say that. I want to say he would not have been able to open up two so-called quote-unquote boiler rooms, as they call it, Mr. Ballin said, without the mafia's approval. So that kind of semi-write that off, you know, so Michael had to look at people in his fucking circle, you know, but, you know, I don't want to give away everything and anything right now. So let's continue with the story. I just want to point that assessment out. Me as a three-dimensional mindset person that I am, I would start looking at my circle, my closest circle, my families, and the ones who I'm involved with, period. Let's continue.
Forward to March 29th, so 17 days after that first raid on their condo. And that night, Michael and Dahlia had been eating dinner at a restaurant. And when they left and headed out to the parking lot, once again, standing around Michael's car were several police officers clearly waiting for him to return. And so without even needing to ask why they were there, Michael and Dahlia, they go over to them and they just start pleading with them to understand that this is a setup. We do not have drugs in this car. We don't know what's going on here. Please, you got to understand that someone's doing this to us. But this time, when they searched his car, they would find something. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Experian. Back when I was just a young buck in college, I was broke. And so naturally, I took out a credit card with a $5,000 limit and immediately maxed it out on buffalo chicken calzones and beer. Now, as soon as my card got declined, I didn't pay it off. Instead, I just took the card, tucked it back into my wallet, and forgot about it. But the bank did not forget about my $5,000 debt, and my failure to pay it back wrecked my FICO score. A FICO score is a type of credit score. Over the last 10 years, I've been able to rebuild my credit score, but it has been a slow and painful process. And so my suggestion to you is to avoid the unpaid beer and calzone credit trap and just closely monitor your credit score. And with Experian, you can do that for free. In addition to closely monitoring your credit score, they will also send you alerts anytime your credit changes. Experian also offers a dark web scan. If you've ever been the victim of a data breach, and you may not know if you have or not, your information potentially could live in the dark web. And that's a place where criminals could use it to commit fraud. And if that happens, it'll wreck your credit along with a bunch of other horrible things, unless you catch it and report it. And on that, if you do find inaccuracies on your credit report, you can easily submit disputes and track those disputes on Experian's online dispute center. It is time to take charge of your credit. Get Experian credit monitoring, alerts, your FICO score, and that dark web scan all for free. Just go to Experian.com/Mr. Ballin. Again, that's EXPERIAN.com.
Okay, excuse me for his little advertisement. I can't skip through this. I'm doing everything right now on my so-called speaker app. So I don't know how to skip through all this. So, me personally, I had Experian and I'm not really pleased by them, but feel free to do what you want with that information, with whatever he's promoting. He's getting paid from them. I'm not. If I could skip through this shit, I would. But let's continue.
/ Mr. Ballin. Okay, back to the story. After searching Michael's car, the police would find a small bag of cocaine stuck inside of a cigarette carton tucked underneath his spare tire in the trunk. And when Michael saw them pull the cocaine out, he began to cry because he knew, even though it was not his and he had not put it there, that he was going to jail because he was going to get arrested for possession and he was on probation and he was screwed. And so he just begins crying and pleading with police to understand that the cocaine was not his. He swears it's not his. Meanwhile, Dahlia, she's looking at the drugs and now she's second guessing herself. Is Michael lying? Is he actually selling drugs? And he's been lying to me too. But when she sees her husband crying hysterically and looking so sincere, she believes that he's got to be telling the truth. And so pretty soon she was standing beside Michael and pleading with police as well to let them go, that this was totally just a setup. And amazingly, these police officers who were aware of the previous raids on Michael and Dahlia's property, they told them, look, we do think this is pretty suspicious that somebody keeps calling in about you selling drugs and now magically the drugs are in your car. And so what we're going to do is we're going to confiscate this cocaine. We're not going to arrest you. Instead, go home, be safe, call us if you see anything strange, you hear anything strange, and we're going to begin investigating to figure out who is making all of these calls. And so Michael and Dahlia were totally relieved to hear this, but at the same time, they were kind of terrified because clearly whoever was looking to get Michael in trouble now was prepared to break into his property in order to do it. And so what was stopping them from breaking into their condo and planting drugs in there as well? And so after these police officers left, Michael and Dahlia hopped in the car, they sped back to their condo and they went inside and they searched it top to bottom, looking for any sign that anyone had recently been in there or if there were drugs or anything illegal inside of their condo. And after looking and finding nothing, they just locked their doors, shut their windows, shut the blinds, and just prayed that the police would be able to quickly identify who was doing this to them and make them stop. But over the next few months...
Now, okay, before Mr. Ballin continue on with this story, let me ask you men this. Who had access to your vehicle? Now, automatically, when I first heard this story in my mind, I started thinking it's got to be the mafia because it takes somebody who has access to your vehicle. There's some high-level shit. Not an everyday person, unless they force entry into your vehicle, could plant some kind of substance in your vehicle. Right then, if I was Michael, my antennas would have been the fuck up automatically. I'm not trusting no one. No one. You understand? And I would have been suspicious because how the fuck did cocaine get in my vehicle when I know I ain't put it in there? So who else got access to my shit? Don't let that ponder in your minds. Let's continue on.
The police would not figure out who this anonymous caller was because the caller stopped calling. And so for a little while, Michael and Dahlia were convinced that the whole ordeal was over and done with, and they basically returned to their normal lives. But on August 5th, 2009, roughly 4 months after the cocaine was found in Michael's car, the anonymous caller would come back with a vengeance. On that morning at around 5:45 a.m., Dahlia left the condo, leaving Michael in bed, and she headed out to the local gym to get a workout in. Around 6:30 in the morning, she stepped off the treadmill and she looked at her phone and she saw she had a missed call from a number she didn't recognize, and this number had left her a voicemail. And so she calls her voicemail, she puts it to her ear, and as she's listening, her heart starts to race because it was a Boynton Beach detective telling her there had been some sort of incident at her condo and she needed to come back right away. Terrified, Dahlia grabbed her things and she ran out of the gym. She got in her car and she called this number back. And when the detective picked up, she tried to get more information from him about what this incident was, what happened. And the detective would only say that it involved her husband and he would explain everything when she came back. And so...
Okay. The whimsical nature of a woman. And the only reason why I'm not trying to give the whole video away, why aren't you guys listening? But what are the chances your so-called woman decides to go to the gym while you're still at the so-called condo sleep and something magically takes place without her being there? So I'm going to say, let that ponder. Let's continue.
In a total state of shock, Dahlia turned on her car and she sped out of the parking lot and she headed back towards her condo. And when she turned onto her street and saw her condo, she hit the brakes and just stared. In front of her condo were all these police cars with their lights on, and police officers were walking around, and yellow crime scene tape was lining the outside of her property. And inside of the taped off area, there were all these crime scene photographers taking pictures of her condo. And so as Dahlia is sitting in her car at the top of the street, just staring at this crazy scene she's seeing, one of the Boynton Beach police officers sees her and walks up, and after confirming that she was Dahlia DiPolito, he said to her, leave your car here and come with me. And so Dahlia, who knows obviously something bad has happened, but really doesn't know the extent of it, she puts her car in park, she gets out, and she begins walking with this police officer over towards this cluster of 3 people that are standing right in front of her property. And it would turn out one of them was the detective who had called her on the phone. And so Dahlia is led over, and that detective, as soon as he sees Dahlia, he walks over to her and he says to her very matter-of-factly that someone had called about a disturbance in their condo, and shots were fired, and unfortunately her husband Michael was dead. Dahlia, who was totally hysterical, was gently led away from her condo into a nearby police car, and they would drive her to the police station where they would sit her down and begin asking her questions about her husband. And they would say to her, look, I know you just found this out, but we gotta figure out what could have happened because a killer is on the loose. We need to find this person and stop them. And so at first, the conversation was really just Dahlia crying and the detective kind of calming her down. But eventually, she would tell the detective about the anonymous caller who kept calling the police and claiming Michael was selling drugs, and how she and Michael suspected that, probably the anonymous caller was connected to someone from his past, maybe someone from the mafia, or maybe one of the victims of his boiler room scam, or it could be any number of other people that Michael had done wrong in the past. And so the detective, he's taking diligent notes and he's listening to Dahlia. And then at some point in a break in the conversation, he says to Dahlia, okay, it's time to get serious. I need to know if you know this guy. And so Dahlia, she was kind of looking down and she looks up confused what he's talking about. And then the door opens and this huge guy in handcuffs walks into the room.
Come here. Bring this guy in here. Get over here. Get over here. You know who this guy is?
No.
You've never seen him before?
I've never seen him before. Ever.
Do you know her?
Put your head up and look at her.
Put your head up.
I've never seen him.
What were you doing coming out of her house? Get him out of here.
It would turn out Dahlia was lying. She did know who that guy was. Almost immediately after marrying Michael 6 months earlier, she had stolen $200,000 from him, but apparently that wasn't enough for her. She needed the rest of Michael's money as well as his condo. And so she had been the anonymous caller. She was the one calling the police and tipping them off that Michael was selling drugs out of the condo and out of his car. She was the one who planted the cocaine in the back of his car because she...
Okay. Now, once again, Mr. Ballin said a mouthful. This bitch stole $200,000 from her so-called husband. That wasn't enough. She needed his condo. Now, $200,000. What the fuck were you doing? $200,000. That wasn't enough. Really, men. Now, do you see why I say you always need to use great discretion with dealing with these so-called modern day women? Take your time. The infatuation stage is a motherfucker. And, I don't blame her. I have to blame Michael. You know why? Because Michael, at the point in time he was at in his life, very crucial moment that when he turned his life around, he sure automatically knew, especially after his first marriage didn't work. Let me take my time. Why am I rushing to be with these damn bitches? Okay, let's just continue on. I just want to point that out. I know if a bitch stole $200,000 from me, that wasn't enough. $200,000? That would, what the fuck do you spend $200,000 on? You living with me. Let's continue.
She wanted him to get arrested because he was on probation and he would go back to jail for a really long time. But when her efforts failed and Michael did not get arrested and so did not go back to jail, Dahlia moved on to plan B. She reached out to one of her ex-boyfriends and she asked him, hey, do you know any hitmen that could murder my husband? And the ex-boyfriend at first didn't think she was serious, but when she kept asking him about it and began offering to pay and really was making it clear that she wasn't joking around, the ex-boyfriend basically told her, no, I don't know any hitmen. And then he, the ex-boyfriend, called the Boynton Beach Police Department and told them about Dahlia and her plan to hire a hitman to kill Michael. And so when the Boynton Beach Police Department found out about this plot, they immediately had one of their undercover agents pose as a hitman and set up a meeting with Dahlia. And so the undercover agent was that huge guy in handcuffs that was led into the room with Dahlia. And so Dahlia goes to meet the undercover agent, the fake hitman. She gets into his car and there's a hidden camera in the back seat that's filming her the whole time. And she's caught on camera saying she wants to kill her husband. She gives money to the undercover agent. And then as she's about to get out, the agent turns to her and he says, are you sure you want to do this? Because as soon as you leave, it's done. I am going to kill Michael and you can't stop it. This is Dahlia's reaction.
There's no changing. No, there's no, like, determined already. I'm positive, like, 5,000% sure. Like, no, when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Like, as soon as you told me I was going to need the money from you, I went, I grabbed it right away. Like, we were good to go. Like, with me, you're not going to have a problem. You're not going to have an issue.
And so the Boynton Beach Police Department, they have all this information about what Dahlia thinks is going to happen, and they decide they can use this information to set her up in the most elaborate way possible. And it just so happened the very popular true crime TV show, Cops, was filming in the area. And so the Boynton Beach Police Department allowed Cops to be a part of this elaborate setup. So they got to film everything that happened. So on the morning of August 5th, Dahlia got up and left her condo at 5:45 a.m. and headed to the gym, knowing, at least in her mind, that the hitman would be coming to her condo right after her, breaking in and shooting her husband twice in the head, because that was the plan they had come up with that was captured on film. And so after the police see her leave at 5:45 a.m., because they were monitoring the condo, they rushed in, they knocked on the door, and they got Michael to come downstairs. And he had no idea his wife was trying to kill him. And so he comes to the door, he's totally confused, but he goes with them and he's kind of ushered off to the police station. And then for about the next hour, the police set up a very convincing fake crime scene right out front of the condo. And then once it was all set up, that detective called Dahlia and left her a voicemail saying that, you know, there's been this incident, you need to come back to your condo. And then a couple of minutes later, when Dahlia called them back and said, okay, I'm coming back to the condo now, that's when the TV crews for the Cops TV show, they kind of set up in the bushes and got ready to film what happened next.
Listen, we had a report of a disturbance at your house, and there were shots fired. Is your husband Michael? Okay, I'm sorry to tell you, man. He's been killed. He's been killed, man. I'm sorry.
No, he's not.
Listen,
No.
try to calm down. Listen, right now, we need to get you to the station. We need to get you to our police station. I can't let you in, man. We have to do our job.
After the fake hitman was pulled out of the interrogation room after Dahlia had said, oh, I don't know who he is, the detective just stared at her in total silence for a minute. And then he broke the news that he totally knew all about her murder plot and that she was going to jail.
You're going to jail today for solicitation of murder. You're under arrest. That's an undercover police officer. Everything has been recorded. You were photographed in the convertible when you sat in his car in the front of CVS. What do you want to do? What do you want to do here?
I didn't do anything.
Listen to me.
I didn't do anything.
You're going to jail.
I didn't do anything. Please, I didn't do anything.
Don't tell me you didn't do anything.
I didn't do anything.
You're going to jail today. As soon as I'm done, they're going to come in here and handcuff you and take you to the Palm Beach County Jail, book you for solicitation of first-degree murder on your husband. Your husband is well and alive.
Thank God.
Oh, yeah, thank God.
Can I see him?
No, he doesn't want to see you.
I don't want to see him.
He doesn't want to see you.
Please.
After Dahlia was arrested, she was still sitting in that interrogation room when the Boynton Beach Police Department made a special point of walking Dahlia's husband, Michael, past the open door so she could see him. Here's her reaction.
Oh my God.
He's alive.
Come here, please. Come here. Mike, come here. Come here, please. Come here. Why not? I didn't do anything.
I heard you.
Mike, come here, please. Come here.
Okay. Like, we'll take her back to Brooklyn, please.
Dahlia was initially sentenced to 20 years in prison for what she had done, but after a retrial because of jury bias, her sentence was reduced to 16 years. So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please ask the like button if you can borrow their car for the week and then spend that week driving around picking up as much roadkill as you possibly can.
Okay, let's wrap this up. I want to punch in, but I'm limited on my recording due to my, my subscription fee on Speaker. But, whew. Whew. There's a lot said there. A lot we gotta go ahead and soak up and digest. The whimsical nature of a woman, man. Take your fucking time. I don't give a damn what anybody says to you. You're entitled to taking your time. I blame Michael. And Michael had took his time rather than rushing in with this woman. He understood who she really was. I bet you, and I guarantee you, I mean, I'm not Michael, I can't say, but I'm about 99.95% sure. Michael probably is looking at his ex-wife like, this bitch wasn't this crazy or this bad. I was better off with her. But all jokes to the side, take your fucking time, man. This bitch, like, all the fake tears and coming to the crime scene. And like I tell you, man, and I said this in plenty of my segments, a woman is the greatest actor. You saw she whipped up them tears and act like she's so concerned, played her part like she's supposed to, when the so-called detective called her and said, hey, we have an incident. Your husband might be killed. Straight up played the part. And like I said, God, the Most High forbid, I ain't gonna say God, but even God, some of you like to call the Most High God, whatever you choose to call him, that's up to you. But even then, what if Michael wasn't so lucky to where the ex-boyfriend kept his mouth shut? Her ex-boyfriend didn't say shit, and he happened to meet his faith. Do you understand me? But on the other hand, when you start following the Most High and you turn your life around like Michael did when he had that revelation, look at the protection Michael had. Everybody missed that part. It's all, oh shit, his girl sat him up? Oh, that's fucked up. Not really. Look at the protection that the Most High gave this man, Michael. He turned his life around. He stopped cheating people, robbing people of their money. He started doing shit right. And the Most High spared him in his life at the last moment when it all counted on it. And guess what? The so-called person who's trying to set him up, she got set up for the downfall. So that's what I look for. The whimsical nature of a woman, because these women are whimsical and capricious by nature. By nature, you can't change that. That's why I always tell you, man, take your time. Your only job here and on out is to observe a person and know if they're for you or against you. Don't try to argue it. Don't try to fight it. And damn sure don't try to change whoever they are. You just use great discretion and observe and realize if that person's for you or not. There's no going back. This woman cannot come back from that. At least not with Michael anyway. At the same time, Michael should have took his time. Lucky for Michael, the Most High had his hands around him and spared him from death, because that was it. That was it. I'm quite sure if Michael was still dabbling in the streets and the circumstances would not turn out the way how it did, you know? So with that being said, I thank you guys for checking out 101 with Oxakai. I'm your host, Oxakai. Hope you enjoy this. I catch you guys in the next one, baby. We'll have some more coming, you know. Other than that, check out the Roku. That should be out by June 15th sometime, I'm hoping. So with that being said, let's go ahead and close out, baby. I'm out of here.